Let's start with energy bills, because it's a concern for so many people in Wales and right across the country. Now, the latest forecast is that the energy price cap could hit £3,600, even higher, perhaps, this winter. If you're Prime Minister, will you do more to help people pay those bills?
Yes, and I know this is the #1 concern on families' minds across the country, grappling with higher prices, particularly higher energy bills. As Chancellor, I announced significant support to help people through the autumn and winter that's worth up to £1,200 for the most vulnerable families. And as Prime Minister, I'll go further, because we now know that bills will be higher than we had previously anticipated. That's why I'll cut VAT on energy bills this autumn to put more money in people's pockets.
But you said about that VAT cut back in February that it would disproportionately benefit wealthier households. That's not going to help people in the poorest households, is it?
Well, remember, that comes on top of the support that I've already announced, which is highly targeted at those households who are more vulnerable and need it the most.
But of course, the forecast is that they'll go higher since you announced that package.
Those most vulnerable households are getting £1,200, and this is going to come on top of that and help not just them, but others as well, because I know this is a struggle for many families. It's right that we target support on the most vulnerable.
Do you think it's moral that when people are worrying as to whether they're going to be able to heat their homes this winter, that you've got companies like BP making astronomical profits at the same time?
Well, that's why I, as Chancellor, announced a new energy profits levy on those companies, because I didn't think it was right that these companies would be making billions of pounds of extra profit, in large part because of a war that's going on and the sanctions that we're putting on Russia to help prevent further aggression. And that profit's then accruing to those companies. I thought it was right that we tax those extra and use those proceeds to help support households. That's what I announced as Chancellor. I think that's the right thing to do, and that's what I will continue to deliver as Prime Minister.
You say that you want to lead a UK government that is incredibly interventionist when it comes to Wales. Now, beyond the sort of slogan, what do you mean by that?
Well, one thing I particularly enjoyed doing as Chancellor was engaging with my Welsh colleagues to make sure that the UK government can have a really active and positive role in people's lives in local communities. We created something called the Levelling Up Fund, using new powers where we could demonstrate the benefit of the government in communities across Wales, and we funded around almost a dozen projects in places like Brecon or Aberystwyth, and that was fantastic, and that's a change. I want to go further as Prime Minister, for example, by having not just one but 2 free ports in Wales. And it's a policy that I created. It's an opportunity we have because of Brexit, and it's working across the UK to bring jobs and investment into areas. I want to bring that to Wales, not just 1 but 2. Hopefully we can have one in both North and South Wales.
Do you support devolution?
Yes, I do. I do support devolution, of course I do, and I want to work constructively with the Welsh Government. But I do think it's also right to hold them accountable, as the Welsh Conservatives and under Andrew R.T. Davies' leadership do. I think it's right that we hold the Welsh Government account for the state of the NHS in Wales, with waiting times which are worse than anywhere else in the UK.
But the question is as to whether it's right.
But we should also hold them to account.
But the question is as to whether it's right for the UK government to get involved in areas that are the responsibility of the Welsh Government that have been devolved, especially when it is a Labour majority government in Wales, when the Conservatives don't have a majority in Wales. Is that democratic?
Well, there's a Labour administration in coalition with Plaid, and I'm someone who believes passionately in the union. I'm going to stand up for the union as Prime Minister. And look, as Prime Minister and as Chancellor, I care about citizens across the United Kingdom. I want to make sure that they do get the public services that they deserve. So when I, as Chancellor, have put in place record funding for the Welsh Government, I am keen to make sure that that funding is well spent.
Tata Steel is in negotiation with the UK government, wanting potentially over £1 billion in order to help it transition the Port Talbot site, which employs thousands of people in South Wales, to become more green. Is it right for the UK government to be stumping up potentially over £1 billion?
Well, look, my track record on this issue, I think, is clear. I'm someone who values the contribution that not just steel, but the Welsh economy makes to the United Kingdom. And you saw during the pandemic, there was another steel plant in South Wales, Celsa, that needed some help to get through a very tough time. And I, as Chancellor, ensured that they got the support that they needed. So if you're Prime Minister, would you give them that potentially £1 billion or more? I don't think it would be right for me to sit here and start trying to negotiate with any company. I don't think anyone would expect that.
The UK government should be helping them to transition?
The UK government has always, when required, made sure that we support vital industries and important parts of our country.
HS2 is not going to see 1 inch of track laid in Wales, and yet Wales doesn't get any Barnet consequentials, any extra funding as a result of that from the Treasury, which of course you have been running. Now, there are many people in Wales, including the Conservatives in the Senedd, who say that's just not fair, especially when rail infrastructure in Wales is so poorly funded. Is that something that you would address as Prime Minister?
Well, I completely agree with the idea that we need to do more to support infrastructure in Wales. That's something I tried to do as Chancellor, in fact, actually, and we funded around a dozen new business plans for railways that could be brought back to life and restored, invested in the Cambrian line, improved connectivity
But there's no extra cash
between
for rail
Swansea
infrastructure.
and Cardiff. So look, I'm someone who does believe in investing in infrastructure in Wales and will continue to do that. But I do think the question is actually, given that we all care about infrastructure in Wales, why is it the Welsh Government has said there should be absolutely no more road building? That's not going to help grow the economy
well,
of
we
Wales
asked them
and
questions
provide
about
jobs.
what they're responsible for. But if you are in Downing Street as Prime Minister, is that something that you'd look at under your watch? Because there are many people, as I say, who just think it's completely unfair. People in your own party.
Well, I think what they will see from me is someone who's going to work not just constructively with the Welsh Government, but also hold them to account for delivering strong public services in Wales and continue making sure that the UK Government is investing in Wales, whether it's the Levelling Up Fund, whether it's restoring railways, whether it's new nuclear at places like Wilfer, whether it's a second Freeport in Wales. Those are all examples of my commitment to make sure that the Welsh economy is strong, it's growing, that people have good jobs that are well paid and public services that they can rely on. That's the kind of government that I'm going to run.
The races have just started here when it comes to the Conservative leadership race, but some people think that you're already out of that race, that the race is run. It's going to be Liz Truss who is Prime Minister. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's absolutely not the sense that I'm getting when I'm out and about across the country. Everywhere I'm going, there's lots of people who have not made up their mind, and actually people are very receptive to the message I've got about how to restore trust, rebuild the economy, and reunite our country. And I know what our members ultimately are focused on is who is best placed to beat Keir Starmer and the Labour Party in the next general election, and I'm the best person to do that, as well as take on the job of being Prime Minister day one to get to grips with all the issues that we face as people saw me act during the pandemic. I will bring that same sense of urgency and grip to government, restore trust, and I'm confident that I can make good progress in this race.
Rishi Sunak, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.